Welcome to the Program Design Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Monique, teacher and curriculum writer turned program mentor and business strategist for coaches, educators, and online experts. Whether you're looking to create your first ever group coaching program or scale your current offer for more freedom, revenue, and consistent income, this is the podcast for you. Here you'll find practical strategies and encouragement mixed with a bit of manifestation and intuition to help you grow and design a program you absolutely love. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Program Design Podcast. This is a series on creating live experiences without making them a webinar, and this is part 2. So in part 1, in last week's episode, I shared a little bit about what it would look like to create a more informal way of having people get to know you, having people connect with you that doesn't look like a traditional webinar or a traditional 5-day challenge with a specific pitch at the end. We looked at how to structure it, how to create something that really builds trust with people, that creates conversations that can lead to sales later on, but might not be an actual pitch at the end. You might use a structure like this if you're doing something like a lunch and learn or office hours or some sort of speaking event in a corporate space, or maybe in a professional development capacity, something along those lines, where you want something where people can get to know you, they can hear a little bit about your work, but it's not like a direct pitch, a direct sell at the end. So that's what we talked about in part 1, was all about how to structure, what to include, how long it should be, what this should look like. Now in part 2, we're diving into, now that you have an idea of what the content might look like, we're diving into what you can do to actually not just build trust, which was part 1. We're talking about building demand for your program. Because the thing that I see a lot of people doing, myself included, is they focus so much on the trust building, which is important, that they don't actually build demand. So people find their stuff really helpful, but they don't actually buy from you. And that's what we want to avoid in this one. This is part 2. We're talking about building demand, but not without a pitch. Like, we're not talking about having the whole pitch like you would see on a webinar slide, like with slides of like, here's the program, here's the promise, here's the price, here are the bonuses, all that kind of stuff. We're not doing that in this situation, but how can you still build demand for your program indirectly? So the first thing that I want to share is a lot of coaches will teach you to sell directly. And I would say in this experience, that's not what I would necessarily do. So I've had coaches that tell me you need to be really direct and make an offer, sell directly, be upfront. And I think there is an absolute time and a place for that. But if you're doing something like a lunch and learn, or you're doing something like a professional development kind of workshop, to me, people aren't coming there expecting to be sold to, and it can be very off-putting. They're expecting to get something of value out of it, and you want to kind of open the door to curiosity to what else there is that you do. But it's not like a webinar. When someone comes to a webinar, by and large at this point, they know that there's a pitch at the end. If they're signing up to a webinar that's free on the internet, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a pitch, but there are certain places where that doesn't really make sense to have a full-blown pitch at the end. So what can you do instead to build demand for your program? And this is why I share the concept of program-led selling. So this is a new concept that I've shared in Signature Program Design. There are 6 strategies that I share, but I'm going to dive into 3 in this week's episode. And program-led selling came to me because I had learned a lot of different strategies around how to sell indirectly. What had worked for me, I kind of figured it out over time. And what I realized, the thing that kind of put my selling style that made it distinct, is because I'm so focused on program design. Of course, it's the Program Design Podcast. I'm really focused on how can I not push myself, but how can I highlight the benefits of my program so that people can see that this is what they need without directly selling it. So that's kind of the experience, or the lens that I look at program-led selling. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of how you can use them. So let's talk about this in terms of mistakes and what to do instead of making these mistakes, okay? So the first thing that a lot of us do is that we are afraid of being salesy. So we just teach content. So you want to be helpful. You want to build trust. And so you just think about like, what's a really helpful piece of content that I can teach? And you go to teach on that thing, or you go to coach on that thing. And then you're like, great, thanks so much. And then you leave, right? And the issue with that is people can find you really helpful and they can find that strategy really helpful. But if you are not showing the bigger picture, like I shared a little bit about in part 1, they're not going to see what else they need. And so one of the program-led selling strategies that I teach is to show the big picture and ideally show it through your signature framework or a few of your signature frameworks. So I teach like having a whole signature framework for your whole program, or even having smaller visual frameworks that explain a certain concept, right? So what you want to do is, even if you haven't worked with me and you don't have your whole signature framework, that's okay. But having something that that shows people the big picture of what you do, that this is one piece of the whole series. So for example, I'm doing it here is like program-led selling is one of the strategies that I teach, and I will teach you 3 here, but there are 6 in total that I teach my clients, right? And so I'm showing you the big picture that there are 3 more. So that's an example of showing the big picture. You want to show that this is one skill or one thing or one concept that I'm teaching here, but there's more to it than that. And so you want to be sharing that big picture, ideally like in your framework or something like that. And that is one program-led selling strategy. So people see, okay, this is where this fits in the scope of your work. And so that's why I think it's so helpful to actually really understand your signature process and the scope that you include in your own creations, your own ideas, your own expertise, because then it's so much easier to talk about a piece of that because you have your own like lens and way of speaking about the work that you do. So when you can, don't just teach a how-to, show where it fits in the great scheme of things or in the big picture of your work. Does that make sense? So that's the first one. Don't just teach content, show how it fits in the great scheme of things. And when you think about it, it is still really good teaching. Like if I'm teaching something even to my actual students or my clients, I want to show where this fits in the big picture of the whole thing that we're going to work through together, right? Just teaching a concept in isolation isn't helping anybody. They can't see where it fits in. And so you want to be able to do that here as well. Like this is one piece of the whole puzzle. So that's the first idea. Don't just teach content, show where it fits in the big picture of things. The next is so simple, but so many of us, if you're afraid of appearing salesy, aren't going to do it. And it is the next program-led selling strategy is the simplest, and it's just to mention your offer in passing. Just mention it. So I remember feeling very uncomfortable doing this because I didn't want to appear salesy. I didn't want to appear to be just in it for the money or whatever fears that I had. And so then I never mentioned my offer. And consequently, people didn't know I had one, right? When I remember first doing professional development workshops, and I didn't even say that I had anything because I felt so uncomfortable. But really, you're doing people a disservice by not actually sharing what it is that you do. Like, can you imagine an author getting on a podcast and not mentioning their book? That would be ludicrous, right? Like we want to know that you have a book. Like we want to read more about your book. It's the same thing. So when you're going to do your work, like your workshop, your lunch and learn, whatever it is, the format that you're doing, you just mention in comments or in passing, like, this is what my clients and I are doing in XYZ program. This is what this is what I'm working on with my clients. Something just along the line so people know, people pay you to learn more about this. Like your program exists. It's so simple, but a lot of us forget to actually mention it. And it can take practice to even be able to say, like, in my program, we blah, blah, blah. In my work, we do this, right? Like actually mentioning it so people know it exists. You're not saying, hey, buy my thing. You're just mentioning that it exists. And then the last mistake that I see people making is that they fear being salesy. And they think as a result that the only way to sell is to actually pitch and sell the thing, right? But it doesn't need to be like that. You can sell in a way that feels very authentic and helpful, but still is selling your program. So a lot of us think that the pitch at the end is the sale, right? That's when you're saying buy my program, here's the doors are closing this day, blah, 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 which you do need to do sometimes, but if you just do that at the end, it's going to feel really disjointed. If you're kind of indirectly selling throughout, it's going to feel a lot more natural. And then when you have a call to action, like, hey, book a call with me or join my email list or download this freebie and then they can become part of your email list or follow me on Instagram, it's going to feel like, oh, that's just the next step. You don't have to actually pitch. But let's talk about another strategy that you can do instead of feeling like the only way to sell is with the pitch. And if not, you're being salesy. One of my favorite sales strategies, or my program-led selling strategy, actually comes from teaching. And so like we do it with students. No, I promise it's not a salesy feeling, but it really, really helps to sell your program. And what it is self-assessment. So I remember back when I was becoming a teacher, one of the ways that we were taught to teach was by using self-assessment. So the old school way of thinking, the old school way of teaching was to just, and which you may think of when you think back to your school days was, or even university days, was to learn a concept and be able to apply it, write it in an exam, whatever, right? But in the way that we're teaching concepts now is to elicit a student's metacognition. We want them to think about their thinking. And one of the ways that we have them think about their thinking is using self-assessments. So where are you at with this concept? How did you understand it? Are you stuck on anything? Like, we don't want them to just learn the concept. We want them to be able to evaluate how well they learned the concept. What questions do you have? Where are you at with this concept? And so if we use it in the classroom, and I promise it's not a salesy feeling. I mean, I don't think it is, but it's still going to sell your program indirectly because you're going to get them to assess where they're at with something. And it's still helping them because, again, it's identifying where they're at. It's eliciting their metacognition so they can think about, where am I at with this journey? What am I missing? What do I need to move forward? It's very helpful. So let's give a couple of examples. So let's come back to the a parenting example. And say you're a parenting coach, and one of the concepts you want to teach is the idea of self-regulation. So you're not like to have parents stop yelling at their kids. They need to self-regulate, think about their response before they respond to their child, right? So you could say, once you explain the concept of self-regulation, you're maybe not telling them how to do it, but like, this is the concept of self-regulation. You could give them a strategy or two to self-regulate. You can say, okay, on a scale of 1 through 10, or you'll hear me say like on a scale of red, yellow, green, how are you feeling about your ability to self-regulate at this point? Red, you're feeling like, I've never really thought about that before. I just feel like as soon as my kid does something, I just have the urge to yell, or I can't defend I can't uphold the boundary and I just give in, or I feel really frustrated. Like, maybe you're a red. Maybe you're a yellow, where you feel that level of frustration, but you can pause sometimes. And then other times you might give in, or other times you might feel yourself yell and then regret it later. Like, where are you at? Or are you at a green? When your child does something that frustrates you, you have a moment, you can regulate your emotions and you can respond back to them. Where do you feel like you're at in this spectrum? Right? So that's an example. If a parenting coach is telling you this, you might say, hey, self-regulation is really important. And parents might go, yeah, okay, I should do that. But if you actually have them pause and think about where are they at in that spectrum, and I'm making it up, I'm not a parenting coach, but if you have them like self-assess where they're at in that scope and that's in that spectrum, they can say, actually, I understand the concept of self-regulation, but I think we're actually at yellow. Maybe I do need to work on this more and let go of some habits or patterns, because they can actually start to think about their thinking and start to think about their reactions. So it's indirectly selling your program, because if they think they're at a yellow, they realize, oh, there's actually more work to be done. And maybe I do want some support with this. Does that make sense? So that's why self-regulate or self-assessment can be really, really helpful. Let's give you one more example. So let's talk about mine. So for example, we're talking about being able to sell without feeling salesy. I could say, and using that program-led selling strategy, if I said, hey, how are you feeling around that? Red, you're like, I hate talking about my offer. I feel so uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to mention it. Like I don't know, my throat closes up and I never ever talk about my offer. I'm in the red. Yellow, you're like, I might do some of these things, but I probably could be more intentional. I think I could use some more strategies that feel more authentic to me. Some of the sales strategies that I've been taught don't feel like me. They feel a bit pushy. I don't love them. Or green, I love the way that I'm selling right now. It feels really authentic to me. I feel really confident in it. I'm a green. So that's another way. That's another example of like having that self-assessment. And then you can think about, if you wanted to learn from someone how to sell in a way that feels authentic. I do teach that in my programs. It's not the only thing we look at. Then you can get a sense of if you wanted to move forward with that or not. So let's recap how to kind of infuse or build in some of that demand without having the pitch using some of the strategies that we talked about today. So we talked about program-led selling. So it's about selling your program indirectly and putting the emphasis on the program and how the program is going to help someone rather than feeling like you're pushing your services. You're just talking about your program indirectly, right? And so the mistakes that a lot of us make first might be that you just teach concepts and you don't show the bigger picture so people don't see how else you can help them. Because remember, you have so much more expertise than anyone who's going to be drawn to your work. Like sometimes we don't even realize how much more and how much we can support someone. And so it's our job to show like this is one piece of the whole big picture because they're not going to know that, right? So that's the first program-led selling strategy is to show them the big picture. You can do this by showing your signature framework. You can do this by sharing how many steps there are in a main program, like just showing them the big picture in some way so they can see that there's more to learn or more to work through or more to be coached on, however you want to say it, right? The next selling strategy is a lot of us just forget to mention our offer or we feel really uncomfortable talking about our offer. So the next program-led selling strategy is just to straight up talk about it and have a name for it or name either like your concepts and things like that. Just talk about the offer that you have. And then the third program-led selling strategy is to use self-assessment. So have people assess where they're at in specific concepts. It gets them a sense of how well they're doing. It can really be helpful and valuable for them, but they can also get a sense of maybe I would like more support with this because they're using that self-assessment to figure out where they're at with the particular concept that you're teaching or that you're coaching on. Sometimes people tell me, I'm not a teacher, Lauren, I'm a coach. I know it's the same. Okay. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I would love to hear from you. As always, you can always send me a message, leave a review on iTunes or your podcast app of choice if you found this helpful. And I will see you on another episode of the Program Design Podcast.